and welcome to the Remote Work Toolkit, a podcast by Time Doctor. My name's Ryan, and I'm here with today's guest, Aimee Engelmann. Aimee is the Chief Marketing Officer at PROBE Group, which is an award-winning customer experience business that operates in 5 countries, has over 17,000 staff, and serves clients around the world from both work from home and work from office. Aimee's also the former CEO and founder of BPO, which is a really well-respected outsourcer in Australia and the Philippines. Aimee, hello, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. We're really looking forward to speaking with you a little bit here. But to get us started, I want to start with you and help the listeners learn a little bit more about your expertise. So can you tell us a little about your background and how you made your way to becoming CMO at PROBE Group?
Sure. So my early career started in Australia in corporate, mostly in telco and financial services. At the age of 30, I had an entrepreneurial spirit that was kind of sitting there in the background that I decided to pursue, and started a marketing agency which focused on the telecommunications niche. And growing that business actually took me to the Philippines, which is how I got exposed to the outsourcing industry, and in particular the amazing talent that's available in lots of different regions around the world, and hired some Philippines-based staff to help bolster the resources in my marketing agency and also improve its margins. I really enjoyed that experience, and I decided to wrap up my marketing agency, sell that, and start a company in the Philippines. So I sought investment and grew an outsourced firm called BPO to about 450 staff over 6 years, which was very fun, very challenging, learn a lot. And at that time, I decided it was good to maybe think about exiting. And PROBE Group were the business that acquired BPO back at the end of 2019. So that led me to kind of exit and then think about what I was doing next. And although typically in exits you see a kind of contracted must stay on for a certain amount of time, it was actually by choice that I joined PROBE, and after speaking with the CEO, decided to come on board as the CMO. And I've been with PROBE for about 18 months, so it's been an amazing journey. They're a very high growth business, so lots of challenges, and themselves have acquired a few outsourcing companies in the last couple of years. So it's been very busy and very fun.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, sounds like an entrepreneurial path to getting into the outsourcing world. And, you've worked with some amazing companies. So we're really excited to have you here to talk about that. Some of the things that we wanted to discuss are, the current market for talent for outsourcers. Finding and keeping talent, that's something that has always been really difficult for outsourcers. It's an industry that has notoriously high turnover. But what we're seeing right now, with everything that's been going on with the pandemic, since that happened, things have become even more difficult. There's still health concerns, quarantine measures, depending on where you are in the world, are more or less severe. There's the economic pressures that we've been seeing. And there's this indecision still about remote work, how outsourcers are approaching it, how their clients are approaching it, and how that is kind of trickling down to the staff and the talent that outsourcers are looking to keep a hold of and to attract. So I want to dig into that just a little bit more. And if you could tell us, Aimee, what sorts of things are you seeing among outsourcers when it comes to the current labor market? What new challenges are outsourcers facing in this war for talent?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really interesting time, hasn't it? There's been such a dramatic shift in such a small period of time post COVID. And so that competition, firstly has just heated up between competing for key talent. And what we're seeing is in some quite kind of simplistic ways is it's just an increased demand for that talent. So some situations, something just crossed my desk this week where a key staff member in talent acquisition was offered double their salary to move to another company for the same role with the same level of responsibility, managing talent acquisition. And sure, there's always competitiveness in the market. You might see 10 or 20 or 30% on top of salaries being offered for key staff, but double is really unheard of. And I think that's common throughout the middle management areas where there is really, really high competition for talent. I think the other thing that's a key challenge is, since there's been the opportunity to work from home, and a lot of employees have enjoyed that for many different reasons, some of it financial, some of it, safety as well, which is a core concern for staff. There now seems to be this friction between employees and, in some places, their workplace, to understand what's the longer term plot for remote and flexible working. Have companies actually worked out what they're going to do post COVID? What are their policies going to be around work from home? So what I'm seeing is some candidates actually go into the recruitment process asking up front, is this a flexible position, or will I be working from home, and what portion? So I think that's a new challenge where there's a lot of power, in a way, that has kind of shifted and moved to the employee, where the employee can now say, or the candidate can now say, look, here are the things that are important to me, and match that up with potential potential positions that they're looking at in the marketplace. And I think the other thing that I'm seeing is just timeframes to recruit. With that war on talent, that candidates are taking more time to decide, they've got more options, and so we're seeing timeframes blow out up to double what they used to be, particularly for complex positions. So it is very challenging, and it has shifted quite quickly when you think about the impacts of COVID.
Right. It seems like that shift is being felt across industries, but with outsourcers in particular, that just change in dynamic of people requesting remote upfront. So, people who have decided, what, this is for me, this is what I want to do going forward. So for outsourcers, when it comes to keeping their current talent, right? We talk about the people who come into the market and remote is what they want and ask for it up front. What about keeping their current talent? What sort of advice would you give to an outsourcer that's concerned about losing the staff that they already have?
Yeah, great question. And I think a lot of businesses are going through these steps at the moment, I would assume and hope. One key practical kind of tip is to have a look at your workforce and prioritize your high performance. So who are those people in the business that you really think would be very difficult to retrain a candidate if they left? They have knowledge that's specific to the business. They might have some really fantastic relationships with your clients, and then having a chat to them one-on-one. So, what are their drivers? What are they looking for? Are they looking for flexibility to work from home? Are they looking for flexibility in their hours? Are they concerned that they're not on market rate and potentially they're missing out on benefits, whether it be pay, or it could be leave, or other sort of healthcare, other benefits that are important to them. um, so I think that assessment to be done as quickly as possible for high performing staff, because my view is that you are much better off being on the front foot and having a conversation with your high performing staff earlier than waiting till the last minute when they have an offer on the table from a competitor, and then trying to renegotiate or swoop in over the top of that. Because given the current situation, that market competitor could be looking at offering double the salary, and in having that one-on-one conversation with your high performing staff, you might end up in a position where it's not all about salary. It might be 30 or 40% increase on salary, and then it might be something else which as a business you can provide, but doesn't have as much financial burden to keep that staff member happy and engaged. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking it's all about money and that it's just about the financial benefit. But what I see and what I believe when it comes to kind of retaining high performing talent is that it varies. You just like in a great marketing approach, it's one to one. You're trying to personalize your offer to that person as much as possible. I think we need to shift to that in the candidate market and spend the time to develop those personal retention plans. So that would be my first advice, is really looking at at those high performing staff and what are their drivers, and designing something, a retention plan that's one-on-one. I think all organizations should be looking at their culture, and I think questioning what's their long-term plan for post-COVID for managing flexibility and work from home. Is it important to their workforce? What proportion of their workforce? What would that look like? And being really clear on the pathway for that, because I think at the moment candidates, particularly in some markets where there's still strict quarantine, it's work from home because it's work from home because of quarantine. But what happens? Candidates are thinking, well, what happens when things open up? What does that pathway look like? And what is the business's policy on flexibility? So I think trying to be clear on that within the organization as quickly as possible, and communicating that to candidates and being upfront. So yeah, being really, really clear on the future approach. So yeah, in summary, that would be the three things: one-on-one approach for high performing talent, thinking about the culture and how you're continually working to foster a great culture in the organization, and then being really clear on the future approach.
Yeah, the communication one, it's just so huge. Not just talk to your top performers, but listen to what they have to say. It's amazing how many stories I'm hearing of people who either just don't have the conversation at all whatsoever, which is crazy, or the people who they hear out their staff, that they ask for and get their responses on how they want to proceed and move forward, and they totally ignore it. So, being able to communicate, but then also implement the things that you're hearing from your staff, I think is hugely important. Um, to go back here then to when you're hiring new people, bringing new people in, I'm curious if you have any advice for outsourcers. Given how hot the market is and how competitive things are, what can they do to gain a competitive advantage from the outset in the search for new employees? Do you have any examples of outsourcers who are getting it right, or advice for how people can operate a little bit differently in the climate?
Yeah, great question. And I might be a bit biased on this one, Ryan, because I'm a marketer by trade. But I think for recruitment departments and talent acquisition, the first place they should be going is to their marketing department to say, hey, we've got some new challenges. How do we position ourselves externally to attract that high performing talent? So that might be engaging those experts to come in and have a look at how they approach their recruitment messaging and their recruitment funnel. It could be hiring new people into the business that are really, really good at that employee value proposition and the tactics that underpin that to attract great candidates. So there might be a people piece that's missing to help bolster that experience given the competitiveness. It could be a technology piece that might be missing as well. So when thinking about talking to potential candidates, communication, we've just spoken about that, so important. So how do you keep a candidate warm and engaged, whether it be prior to the sourcing stage or during their application stage? So technology and tools become very, very important. Using automation, being able to tell great stories throughout that process of other people who have joined the organization and what their experience have been. So that's super important, thinking about that communication. Proof is another thing. So candidates look for simple proof when they're thinking about who they join. Sometimes that can be done through awards. So taking the time to write submissions to awards and get that external proof. And sometimes that comes with like a really valuable icon or a visual tool that can then be used throughout the communication. So all those sorts of things around that marketing piece, I think, is really important. So if there's not a great understanding within the business of the fundamentals of marketing within the recruitment division or the talent acquisition division, that would be kind of my first piece of advice. I think obviously when people come to work, they want to have fun. So finding ways to be able to communicate the culture. What's the culture like? What are the things that unique about the experience, and how does that translate to a remote work environment as well. So, sometimes I see when people join an outsourcing business, they're given this amazing swag on their first day. So there's a delivery of really cool swag, and I know Time Doctor does this as well, because I saw someone join your company the other day on LinkedIn, and saw a great a great post on LinkedIn about it, and that's the sort of thing that wows the person on their first day. I think sometimes there's this trend to when someone leaves, to kind of have a cake or a little thank you or a celebration. But what we where that needs to start is actually when they start in the company, not when they leave. You want to have that big celebration. So that's just one example. But how do you show what the culture is like in your organization, and how do you continually express that to the external market, and what's the proof that relates to that? So employee opinions surveys are a great way to also help candidates understand, how your current staff perceive their experience. So any work on employee opinion, and kind of bringing that up front, being able to show how that's improved over time is really important. Um, and then I think the other thing for competitive advantage is it's almost like working your leads before your sales need to ramp up. Proactive sourcing is a huge part of what the industry needs to do now, and making sure that they're topping up, their lists of people who have an awareness of their firm, have an understanding of the sorts of positions, getting those stories, shared with them about how great it is to work at their particular organization. So when you have those recruitment needs, you've already got that funnel or that database of warmed up candidates, and you're not starting from scratch. So and data plays a big part of that. How do you connect, what the sales teams and pre-sales teams are doing? How do you connect that to the talent acquisition team, so they're aware of what sort of capacity is going to be needed, months in advance? So I think that's really important, connecting those parts of the business and getting the proactive sourcing happening.
Right. Proactive, definitely better than reactive in this labor market. And I really love the point about proof, because it's something that seems so simple, but it's just so uncommon. Being able to put that out there, I think, is a big differentiator. Plus swag. Who doesn't like that, right? As far as clients, so we've talked about the talent itself in this picture, but it's such an important factor when it comes to interacting with clients and negotiating with clients. Where do you stand from talent standpoint? So you know for the people listening, any advice that you have for outsourcers and how they should approach client interactions, how they should look at SLAs, given how competitive the market for talent is right now, and how that's impacting the individual's talent basis.
Yeah, great question. I think COVID has proven that that relationship and communication between client and their outsourcing or BPO firm is super important, but also how flexible some of those SLAs need to be in pandemic times. I don't think many contracts were written or agreed with an understanding that we'd be in COVID, so they have needed to absolutely be flexible. But I think key things is flagging the challenges often and early. So where there are challenges in meeting delays because of change of process or technology, or need to move between work from home and work from office as quarantine restrictions have changed and will continue to change, giving an understanding of how and why it's different. So for example, in Australia, our safety and security concerns are much less than those in other countries. So in more developing countries, things like even just getting to work is a high risk scenario. And then the family unit is much different. So then the risk to other family members, who might be aunts, uncles, grandparents, because the home structure is different and they might all be living together, the risk not just to themselves but to their family is increased. So it's being able to explain why there are those challenges and how that might differ, because of course we all go into these situations, mostly thinking about our frame, and our frame helps us understand, how we're thinking and feeling, but then to be able to communicate how staff are in quite a different scenario and why they might be feeling, a little bit challenged by changes in policy. So just being able to flag it often, flag it early, give examples of those challenges, but then be able to provide solutions. Hoping that you're working with a client in a really flexible manner so that you've got some ways to negotiate the commercial terms outside of what may have been in black and white, because we are in a bit of shade of grey at the moment. So being able to ask for scenarios outside of that and say, look, this is our scenario, this is what we want to do, let's work together to make that happen, because we want to get the result for you, but we're going to need to do things a little bit differently. I think also having action plans ready for situations for retention of top talent. So, again, being able to address what we know is a concern right now with staff retention, and have action plans and have high performing staff, really thought about, and a plan you can put in place that's pre-agreed really helps with that relationship between the outsourcing company and their clients. Obviously being transparent, that's pretty simple, and making sure that you're always transparent with what's happening. And then I think the other thing that's shifted considerably, because the market rates have moved, is being able to have discussions around hiring, salaries, and timeframes. So, thinking about onboarding, timeframes have increased for hiring and onboarding. So how is that going to be managed, and managing that expectation, and also salary. So we're required renegotiating commercial terms to make sure there is the budget for the salary to get those people to come into the business, and make sure that you've got the talent that you need. So it is, I think what it does show is that those organizations that have very strong relationships, trusted relationships with their clients, are able to move through all of these challenges really well. And those that may not, and don't necessarily have that, whether it be that history, or have gone the extra mile before, or have really clear communicational levels, might end up in a bit of a pickle trying to meet the client needs and expectations. So yeah, that would be my my kind of key thoughts.
Yeah, definitely not an easy conversation to have, but some great advice there on how people can do it effectively when talking to clients. So we appreciate that. One last question that I want to ask you before you go. If there is one big thing that anyone who's listening should take away from our conversation today, one thing that you think is the most important going forward as it relates to talent and this climate that we're in, what would you say?
So I might split that into two parts, A and a B. One thing, but two answers, if I may.
More the
So
merrier.
the first one is absolutely talk to your staff, and more than talk, as you rightly said, Ryan, is listen to your staff. So this could be operationalized by ensuring that in the regular work in progress meetings or monthly checkpoints, that managers are requesting certain questions to be asked, and responses to be collated, and action plans to be made. So talk and listen to your staff, super important at the moment, not just focusing on the output, but focusing on what are their needs, what's important to them, as we've spoken about. So that would be the kind of internal one big thing. And the external one big thing would absolutely be the clear communication on why your business is the employer of choice. So understanding, taking all those marketing principles, picking them up and plonking them into your talent acquisition department, and thinking about all the tactics you can use that marketers frequently use to generate leads and prospects, turn that on its head to the candidate world, and be really clear, tell those stories about why you're the employer of choice.
Two great things for us, Aimee. Really appreciate that. Before we let you go here, where can listeners to this podcast learn more about PROBE Group and you, and what you guys are doing?
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. So to hear more about Probe Group, you can definitely go to our website, which is probegroup.com.au. As we said in the intro, Probe Group is a customer experience firm, also has a large consultancy and digital transformation part of the business in 5 countries. So check us out at probegroup.com.au. Follow us on LinkedIn. We publish a lot of great blogs and thought leadership on LinkedIn. So that's a great way to interact and hear our news, what we're up to and why we're an employer of choice. And then if anyone wants to connect with me personally, of course, you can, Aimee Engelmann, you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And we'll be sure to include links to all of that stuff in the show notes below the video. But Aimee, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. We really appreciate it.
No problem, Ryan. Thanks for having me as a guest.